Good evening and welcome to the Italian Impact Podcast. I am your host, Steve Stefano Mancini, and as always, I want to thank you, my listeners, for joining me this week. And, I also want to thank those listeners from all over the world. You hear me say it, I'm going to keep saying it because I'm an appreciative kind of person. I do appreciate the fact that there are literally people from over 20 countries downloading this podcast and tuning in, and that means a lot to me. So grazie mille per I miei ascoltatori in Italia. Thank you for my listeners in Singapore, in Australia, the UK, Canada, Europe. I've even got listeners in Africa. I've got somebody, God bless them, in Russia who's been listening to me faithfully. And I've noticed now that I saw an uptick in listeners from China. So I can honestly say that this thing is global. And to be very blunt, that far exceeded my expectations. With that being said, I would be remiss if I did not do a friendly reminder to all of my listeners that if you had not had a chance to watch the documentary, Fedeltà, Soldier Prisoner, please go check it out. It's on Amazon Prime. I'll call it a one-of-a-kind type documentary. And the reason I say that is the fact that, that was my first foray into filming documentaries. We did it in 2 countries, multiple languages, and, I had the real blessing to talk to a lot of the family members of the actual prisoners, but the story is still alive. And what I mean by that is this year marks the 80th anniversary. So in September, if you've seen the documentary, and if you haven't, please go watch it. You're going to love it. You're going to love it, and you're going to want to make a trip to Chambersburg because the chapel that they built is still there. Some of the other stuff, like the base commander's house from the Second World War, is there. You can go see some of these buildings. They're still there. So you can kind of get a feel for, what was it like during the war. But in September, there's going to be an 80th anniversary reunion because that marks the 80th anniversary of the building of the chapel. And so a lot of the family members are coming back. So mark your calendars for the September 11th, Chambersburg events that's going to be going on, but we're going to do a lot of stuff in the chapel. And I bring that, kind of full circle. I'm then going to be filming that. I'm going to bring a film crew out there, and we're going to capture that 80th, year anniversary of the family members there. And then my ultimate goal will be, maybe later on I tack it onto onto the documentary, or, I just release it as a kind of a freebie. I want people to see this because these family members are so excited to come back to America, to come walk in the footsteps of their fathers. There's a lot of emotion, a lot of memory here. So please, if you haven't seen the documentary, Fedeltà, Soldier Prisoner, it is available on Amazon Prime. Please go check it out. And also, I want to remind a lot of my listeners, especially the folks in the Pittsburgh area or the tri-state area here, I am the honorary consulate now for the Italian government here in the Pittsburgh area. Now, I've been asked, what does that mean? Well, it's sort of an honorary position, but at the same time, I actually do perform functions on behalf of the Italian government. One of the big ones, and I've gotten a lot of calls, and I've already done a few of them, and I'm going to be doing a lot more. Passports, Italian passport renewal. What I can do is your biometrics. So if you're in the Pittsburgh area, I am saving you a trip to Philadelphia. So you don't have to go to Philadelphia to do your biometrics. You can come here. I can also do some witnessing because I have the stamps. So I can do some witnessing on certain documents where, you can sign it and I can be a witness and stamp it, from the honorary consulate. So there are functions that I can do, and I would encourage you can go out to the Philadelphia consulate to get my information, or you could send an email to pittsburgh.onorario@esteri.it. That's .it. So it's pittsburgh.onorario@esteri.it. Or you can just go out to the website and, I have all my contact information out there. And for folks that want to get involved with a podcast, or if you have a great guest or somebody, you should talk to this person, have a great story yourself, don't be shy. Send me an email at questions@ItalianImpactWeekly.com. Again, that's questions@ItalianImpactWeekly.com. I would love to hear from you. I do get some emails. I appreciate that. So far, nothing bad. So, clearly maybe I'm not doing things right because I do need some good fan mail and some what I'll call challenging fan mail, which I haven't got. But no, in all seriousness, I want to thank you, my listeners. And I think I do appreciate the fact that people are tuning in. I appreciate the fact that people reach out to me. That means a lot to me. Again, it's not something I ever thought I'd be doing, 10 years ago. So the fact that I'm doing this means a lot. And with that being said, I've also been very blessed to have some wonderful, wonderful guests. And today's guest is no exception. And I'd like to welcome to the show Robert Campana. He is the founder of Stop Italian Sounding Movement. We're going to talk about that. And Robert's in New Jersey, so he's joining me via call. So Robert, how are you?
Steve, thank you very much for having me on the show. I'm doing well. And first of all, I'd like to say congratulations on your honorary consul position, also on your documentary, and of course for your work you do with your podcast. You're doing a fantastic job all around.
Thanks, Robert. I appreciate it. By the way, on a fun fact, I paused for a minute on you. I almost said Campana, and I was like, don't do it.
You said it correctly.
I appreciate that. I tell you, I make it a point to pronounce names correctly, especially Italian names,
Grazie.
because it's one of these. Robert comes back to the, and it's funny because we're going to talk about Stop Italian Sounding Movement, but I would say there's got to be another movement you're going to start called Start Sounding Italian Correctly Movement, because
yeah, exactly.
People, how people say I'm Italian and then they can't pronounce certain Italian words. And again, I'm not taunting people for not being fluent. It's not easy, especially if you're here in the States and you were born in the States. But I do think, there are just certain things you ought to say correctly if you're going to call yourself Italian.
Like especially with food words, that's my thing, food. And if you're saying bruschetta instead of bruschetta or bruschetta is fine. You don't have to have the Italian pronunciation. I get it.
Right.
Like certain things,
It's funny because I wonder, for the folks that are listening, I wonder if you know this, a CH in Italian is a hard sound.
Yes.
And
yes.
And a CI
that
is a soft sound.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why my name is Mancini, not Mancini. That's you American sounders. And CE is I think that's a che sound, and CH is a hard sound. So let's kind of talk. Let's kind of jump into that first. But we're going to talk about the Stop Italian Sounding Movement. But I would be remiss if I did not begin with, you're in New Jersey. Are you from New Jersey? Let's talk about your roots first.
Yes, so I was born in southern New Jersey. I'm an Italian American. I do have dual citizenship, which I got, I believe, in 2008 or 2009. So I am a dual citizen born in New Jersey of Molise origin. So Molise does exist, the the meme that used to go around, Molise non esiste. Molise is there, believe me, I've been there many times. So growing up, I kind of always had a foot, both in the United States and Italy, so I was kind of exposed to both worlds, if you will.
Right.
And fast forward to university, I studied Italian language, so Italian and also Spanish as well. I'm currently an Italian high school teacher here in New Jersey. So I've been teaching already for 13 years. And in 2019 and the 2019-2020 school year, I decided to take a sabbatical, so a year off from teaching, and I went to Italy. And I got a master's in international business. And while I was there, unfortunately, 2019, 2020, especially, we all know what happened in the world. The world closed down due to COVID, so I found myself stuck in the apartment. But long story short, having done the master's and having obviously written a thesis paper in order to obviously get the master's, I chose to develop that thesis on the Italian sounding phenomenon. So basically the business of 5 Italian sounding cheeses here in the United States and what their economic impact is on the Italian economy. So I did that whole analysis. And since I had a lot of time on my hands during that time, I believe I did a decent job at analyzing everything. And those 5 cheeses I found out were worth at the time over 20 billion euros, which is, I knew it was a lot, but I didn't know it was that much just for 5 cheeses. And then if you take into consideration all of the Italian sounding products, the estimate is over 120 billion euros around the world, of course, not just in the United States. So when I finally made my way back to the United States, first of all, I didn't want to come back because I was in Italy. I had the best food, even though it was a pandemic. I had the best food. I was fine. In fact, where I lived right down the road, there was a place that made fresh gorgonzola, so I couldn't complain.
What city were you in?
So I studied in Milan, Università Cattolica, but I lived in the province right next to it, Varese,
Okay.
Provincia di Varese. So, but right there, I mean, the train was directly right to the center of Milan. It was so convenient. But of course, a lot of my time was cut short because of the pandemic. But glass half full, you know.
Right.
After I
You
did
were
this,
still in Italy. Oh, darn, I'm stuck in
exactly.
Italy. Okay, got it.
Oh, exactly. Friends and family were like, "Well, why didn't you come back?" And I'm like, "Well, I can, but you have the pandemic too. You will get the pandemic if it's not there yet, and I'd rather be, here with food." It's funny because my experience throughout that time was totally different than my family's and my friends who were here, because here nobody could find toilet paper, I believe it was, but in Italy, it was. You remember that?
I do, but there was no shortage of toilet paper. People were panicking
Yeah,
over toilet paper.
I don't. I know. I don't get it. I don't understand. In Italy, things were different because people were focusing on food, and I remember in the beginning there were shortages on yeast and flour, specifically because people were making bread, pizza,
Right.
like they were trying to survive at home, rightfully so. And of course, all the pasta was wiped clean, except for the penne lisce, so the flat
Right.
type of penne. They're like, well, they're not worthy of eating, not even during the pandemic. We'd rather have the penne rigate.
Somebody must eat it or they wouldn't make it. I mean, come on.
Exactly, exactly. But I just remember specifically that it was so funny. But yeah, I finally made
Well,
it back home.
I was going to
Yeah.
say real quick, I do remember one thing during the pandemic, and it's funny you said that because there was a video playing, and it was an Italian guy, an old Italian guy, in the supermarket complaining that there was no spaghetti, and he was like, "This is worse than since the war." And I'm like, it is the funniest video though. He's like complaining people are
I
buying all
believe.
the spaghetti up. I'm like, oh my god.
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. Yes. It would yeah. That's hilarious.
It's like, what are we doing with toilet paper? If you got no food, you don't need
Exactly.
toilet paper. But there was
That's what
no
I'm saying.
shortage of toilet paper. I just didn't
You,
understand it.
but you don't even need toilet paper to survive. That's the funny part. We need food to survive. There's other ways around toilet paper.
I don't know. Well, I tell you what I'm learning is the toilet paper may be more edible than the food we're being fed here in the United States.
Oh
So
my gosh. Yeah, you're not lying about that.
it's terrible.
It is. We really have to read the fine print, and that's basically what part of my work's about. So I did this analysis, came back to the United States, and I didn't want to go food shopping, but I had to, obviously. So I'm sitting in the parking lot of a supermarket. I'm like, you know what? Just out of fun, I'm going to open up an Instagram page, and I'm going to teach people how to recognize real Italian products compared to Italian-sounding ones. So my first post was about Parmigiano Reggiano versus Parmesan, Italian-sounding Parmesan. And that was my first ever one. And from there, just, day after day, post after post, and comments after comments, things started to grow. And now I'm active not only on Instagram, but TikTok and Facebook and all the social medias, YouTube, even though I just put shorts. But my main goal specifically is to teach about the differences between real Italian products versus Italian sounding products. And people say, why did you call it Stop Italian Sounding? I don't want to end the production of Italian sounding products. Stop Italian Sounding could mean stop, comma, is the product you are buying Italian sounding? Do you know what you're buying? So I'm all for transparency when it comes to food. So that's basically the nutshell of my movement.
Now that makes you a good Italian because food is a priority. But let me ask you, what is
Yes.
what is the biggest word that people think is Italian that's not, or maybe even mispronounced that is Italian?
A word, any general word that people think is Italian that's not Italian, like
Well,
food related.
Let's stay with food for a second. Yeah.
Oh God, I mean, I don't know why the first word that pops in my head is gabagool, but gabagool comes from capicola.
Capicola, yeah.
There's a reason why they say gabagool, obviously because of the Southern Italian dialects and pronunciation that turned into gabagool.
Because that's not even real Italian.
That's not an Italian
That's an
word.
American. That's an
It's a real word.
Italo-Americana, right? And that's
Exactly.
and that's one thing that I think a lot of people don't understand. There's a lot of and this is why I think I love what you're doing. There's a lot of things that people think, oh, that's Italian. It's not Italian. It was more or less dialects of people that kind of morphed it when they came here to the States. So sometimes you might be hearing something, it's really a Jersey dialect or a Philly dialect or a New York dialect. It's not Italian, but you just automatically assume, well, a lot of Italians went this part of New York, they talk this way, so that's how Italians talk.
Exactly. And I always like to point out, kind of like how you're doing, the differences between Italian cuisine and Italian American cuisine, or Italy and Italian American community. Like, they're two separate things, both 100% to be respected. obviously, because, the Italian American community came from, historically speaking, Italy, and kind of morphed into its own subculture, if you will. Like, I like to consider the Italian American community kind of like the 21st region of Italy, if you will. A lot of the things that community has contributed in terms of food, in terms of really everything. And so to be respected, but again, my work when it comes to food is to teach the differences between real Italian food and Italian sounding food products.
And there's nothing, and there's nothing wrong, to your point, with Italian versus Italo-Americano, because you just have to understand that this would be authentic still in Italy. But again, I've told this a few times on the show, and I don't like to usually repeat myself, but I'm going to repeat it. But again, it came to a conversation I had with somebody, and he made the comment that a lot of Italo-Americani are stuck in 100 years ago because they've been disconnected from Italy. And that's why, number one, they don't speak the language, which I'm not being mean about that, but the significance of that is because you don't speak the language, you don't pronounce the authentic Italian words correctly. At best, you pronounce them the way, it's kind of morphed here in the States. And again, there's nothing wrong with that, but you just have to understand they wouldn't do that or say that in Italy proper.
Right. You go to Italy and ask for some gabagool, I don't think they're going to understand.
They're probably going to just walk away and say, too much of Sopranos for this guy.
Exactly. I think it's just a funny word, to be honest with you.
Well, Sopranos really made that word.
They did.
Because I'd heard of gabagool, but you never really, okay, it's maybe it's a New York thing or whatever. But then now you're watching The Sopranos, and everyone's like, oh, you got the gabagool, and you're like, oh, come on, man.
Exactly. You can't help but laugh. Well, but no, I think you're right when it comes to, they're kind of stuck. Italian Americans a lot of times are stuck, in 50 years ago, 100 years ago, and they're kind of, staying with what they were brought up with and learned, and kind of never really modernized, if you will, especially when compared to other cultures here in the United States, like the Spanish-speaking community, for example. The Spanish that is passed down to their kids is Spanish that's still spoken in Spanish-speaking countries today. You know what I'm saying? So
right.
It's not,
which is also not quite totally the same, depending on where you're from.
Right. Of course. Right.
So they pick it up. All right, folks, I'm going to be right back. Let me just pay the bills really quickly. Thanks to Greater Pittsburgh Travel. For any of your travel needs, let Tom and the team at Greater Pittsburgh Travel know, and they'll take care of you. For more information, call 412-331-2244 or visit their website at www.greaterpittsburghtravel.com. For all of your plumbing needs, be sure to try Palucci Plumbing. Nick and the team have decades of experience and will get you back up and running. For more information, call Palucci Plumbing at 412-782-5050. And we want to thank the Calabria Club of Pittsburgh. If you're interested in learning more, you can find their contact information on Facebook at Calabria Club of Pittsburgh. Again, thanks Domenica and the team at the Calabria Club of Pittsburgh for your support. And we want to thank La Scuola d'Italia Galileo Galilei, the only nonprofit school in Pittsburgh endorsed by the Italian Consulate. If you're interested in learning Italian or have your children being immersed in the Italian culture and language, be sure to give them a call at 412-404-7070. And that's La Scuola d'Italia Galileo Galilei. We'd also like to thank Chris Gonzalez from the Knights of Columbus. If you have any questions about joining the Knights of Columbus, reach out to Chris Gonzalez at 412-605-9074. All right, welcome back. Robert, stop Italian-sounding movement. Let me ask you another word. Since we're talking about funny words, I broached The Sopranos, Stugotz. Let's talk about that. Is that Italo-Americano, Italian?
Italo-Americano.
Okay. What is it derived from?
I even feel weird saying it. Stoccazzo. So, questo stoccazzo. Cazzo is a bad word in Italian.
Right.
It's, yeah.
That's okay. It's an Italian, and we're on a podcast, so we can say it.
Yes, that's true. Yeah. As a teacher, I'm always hesitant to say.
Oh, I get you.
say that type of stuff. Yeah, that's where it comes from. Yeah.
So it's again.
there are a lot of words out there that people say. Yeah, like we said before, gabagool, and stugazzo, stogazzo, questo stogazzo. There are many of them. I can't think of any more off
Chooch
the
is
top of
another
my
one,
head.
a big one.
Chooch, yes. Oh,
Chooch.
that's a good one. Chooch, yeah. Chucho donkey. It means.
Right. It comes from right. It
Uh,
comes from a legitimate word, but again, it's been
right.
morphed. And you know what? It is funny that you said something before the break about the Spanish piece, because
Hmm.
Italians really are one of the I don't want to say cultures, whatever term you want to use, that was really kind of denied itself when they came here. For a lot of years, they
Right.
didn't pass it down. And again, I
Right.
don't think people appreciate the ramifications of that, because you basically cut that branch off the tree, let's say the Italian. And now, if you have Italians that have been speaking Italian, I guarantee you their family came over here in the 50s. But the
Hmm.
ones who came over here in the 20s, maybe into the 30s or before, they didn't pass that language down. So you can actually
No.
tell by who speaks Italian from growing up in the house. Say somebody's in their 50s, 60s, 70s that speaks Italian when their family came here, versus somebody that's in their 50s, 60s, 70s that doesn't speak Italian when their family came here.
Right. Right. Yeah, you could definitely tell. And I was kind of fortunate growing up. So I'm third generation. I guess my grandparents on
Okay.
my mom's side were born in Italy. They came here and they passed down the dialect to my mom. And growing up, I always heard, I was kind of exposed to that through my mom, and I would hear my mom speak with my grandparents, and that kind of lit the flame, the
Right.
Italian language desire, and specific for that. So I owe it to them. And but I'm very fortunate, and
So you learned
learned both the
though,
Italian.
but you learned
Well,
at a younger
I
age, or just
learned. Well, no, I didn't learn Italian the way I speak it now. That I learned in school. I took in high school and then university, and then traveled to Italy many times. But I grew up exposed to it, never able really to speak it.
right?
I knew all the Italian American words. Those were pretty easy. Like we said, chooch, for example, or
I may have
we call
used a
somebody
few of
like,
those.
yeah. We have all these words, and like you think they mean one thing, but chucho really means donkey, or we would say like cidru, like citriolo comes from it means cucumber, but you call it somebody who's like sitting there like they don't know what they're doing, like an idiot kind of.
Right.
So like we came up with all these words, and they all have meanings now that I went back to go study it. But I had that desire because I wanted to know what they were saying. But I also, it was kind of a pride thing too, because I think a lot of Italian Americans are so proud of being quote unquote Italian, but like you said before, they can't really speak it. So if I'm proud of being Italian, I at least want to know what my heritage entails, what the language is that's spoken, how to speak it, how to do things properly, while also respecting my Italian American side
Now,
at the same time, which is very possible.
and let me kind of build on that a little bit, because I want to ask you your opinion.
Hmm.
I've had people tell me, and I mean, honest, good people have said, why do you care? Doesn't matter. What do you care? What do you tell people like that?
Why do I care? Why do I care about my heritage?
Yeah. Why
Because
does that
I
matter?
think because it's a cultural identity. I feel like I care because it gives me a sense of belonging. I feel like I'm part of a bigger picture. I feel like I said before, cultural identity is a big part. I feel that behind the Italian culture and heritage, there's 1,000 years of history. There's this great, immense culinary history and traditions and food products, while at the same time also innovation. And there's so many things that the Italian heritage represents. And if I am saying that I am that, I want to know about it. So that's the reason why I personally care.
No, that's a good point. And I don't think, I think if people don't pay attention, or really understand history, they definitely don't understand the present. I'll give you kind of a couple of good examples. Just things like our calendar. Why our calendar? Why is August August?
Right.
And a lot of people don't know that. And then you talk about politics, and you hear words like, people throw like, oh, it's Machiavellian. What do you mean by that?
Right. Machiavelli. Yeah.
Right. So what or the fact that there's still references to like Dante's Inferno. Why does that matter?
Right.
So there's all these kind of even today there's still what I'll call cultural references to things that trace their roots back to whether it's Italy or the Roman Empire that are Italian. I mean, we have
absolutely
the West traces its roots back to, to Rome. But at the same time, the
Yes.
Romans can then look at the Etruscans or the Greeks and say, well, we picked up from them. Well, sure you did. But nobody took that to the extreme that the Romans did. I mean, they conquered, quote, the West, and they owned it for probably 600-700 years. And then the irony is and people don't understand this, when Rome kind of fell, it wasn't in a day. It fell gradually and eventually it was gone. But a lot of people don't know this. A lot of the Germanic kings, they wanted to maintain Roman culture. Everyone saw, I want to be a Roman emperor. Like, they still admired that power and that glory and that history, even though they weren't technically Romans. So, and then what did you have for almost 1,000 years? You had the Holy Roman Empire, where you had these German kings. So to sit there and say that our culture isn't one of the most important ones ever, again, go pick up a book, people. You're going to find out Italians.
Yes, no, but
go ahead.
Very, very important. It shaped, like you said, basically modern Western civilization. I mean, we just look at how government is run. Just like the concept of a Senate, Senato.
Right.
I mean, that's Roman.
SPQR.
Yes, exactly. I like to say it means sono pazzi questi romani, but that's different. Senatus populoque Romanus. I think that's what it is. Pardon my poor Latin.
I believe you're right, though.
Yes. I mean, just simple. I mean, you still see that written throughout the city of Rome.
Right.
Yeah, but it's just fascinating what Rome represented in the past, but what it still represents for us in the future. And if you understand ancient Rome, you understand why we are the way we are today as a society. And that is extremely impactful.
And that's funny you say that, because, and I'll get a little bit political here, and I try and stay away from politics, but I think what you see is this, again, I'm going to use a word delicately here, but you see a quasi-invasion of, quote, the West from what I'll call non-Western cultures, and they don't mix. And again, I'm not getting into the whole thing. And the reason they don't mix is because what the West doesn't remember or understand is where their roots come from thousands of years ago. Even areas of North Africa and the Middle East understand that because they were under the Roman Empire. And, so what's happening is when you see this kind of clash of civilizations, to your point, when you really think about that, how we govern and behave traces its roots back to Rome. And then when you figure, even when the Spanish, whenever now years later, the Roman Empire has been gone, but you still have this desire, this conquest kind of mentality, which has always been humanity. It's not limited to Rome. But what did they do? They took the way they did things in Europe outwards, and they spread that. So even countries that are, quote, not in Europe have legacy traditions and culture from Europe, which, you guessed it, came ultimately from the Roman Empire. So I don't think people understand the impact that this thing had and still has to this day. Even, you mentioned Spanish. Where does Spanish come from?
Yeah, right.
I mean, So all these, where to Latin? So, even though the Romans had a lot of Greek in there, there was also, Latin, which was a derived language in and of itself in some ways. But, then when they fell, you have this empire that's far enough apart that you kind of come up, again, sounds familiar, right? You come up with different dialects. And eventually they morph into these, quote, other languages. But that's why when you learn Spanish, and this is why I'm terrified to learn Spanish because I don't know Italian well enough, I'm going to get so confused that, by God, those are the same words. That's right. And it's not by accident.
Yeah, right. So. And it's very interesting when you compare both languages. There's some terms that are used in Spanish. I think of the word for beer, for example. In Spanish, they say cerveza, which is actually closer to the Latin word, whereas in Italian, the word is birra, which is a Germanic word. So it also goes to show you the external influence, linguistically speaking, that Italian had to bear compared to that of Spanish because of the barbaric invasion, let's just call it, which was a Germanic invasion, on the Italian peninsula. Obviously, they left their I'm thinking of their segno. I'm thinking
their
sign on the language. Yeah, their mark. Yeah, I don't know why I couldn't think of that in English.
It's late in the day.
Sometimes this happens to me. Yeah, but so I guess we could both agree on the fact that ancient Rome and ancient Roman history is so important. So I guess the main question is, how do we make people see it the way we do? Like, we know it's important, but why doesn't everybody view it that way? Or how could we convince people that it's that important? Like, we should be learning from them,
Right.
you know? I mean, I don't expect you to have an answer, but I think it's something that we should all be kind of pondering.
Robert, you asked a question. I'm going to have an answer. No, I'm just kidding. But I will throw one thing. But I will say one kind of funny thing to that point is, you know, I don't know if it's just society has changed so much that we're just so attention span challenged. I mean, we just can't.
Right.
You know, we can't even live properly now, yet alone reflect on the past. And I fine distinction between reflect on and live in. But I do think we gotta learn our past, you know. And I'm going to promote.
Yes.
This is a shameless plug for the documentary, but it's an important one because there is a point where Carlo Borghetti, he's a consigliere in the Regione di Lombardia, and he makes the comment about that. He specifically says we have to understand our past so we know our present, like why we're here, where we're at, and then when we grasp that, we know what is possible. And I think when we keep cutting off people's past, the danger there is then I can redefine you. I can make you what I want you to be. And that's why there's such this attack on the past, whether it's American past, whether it's the Italian past, whatever, because once it's gone, then who are you?
That's right. That's right. And I think that goes back to your original question, like, why do I care about my Italian heritage? And I think I care for the reason that you just said. I didn't know how to articulate it like you, but I think that's one of the main reasons why. You know, like it has taught me about myself. It's taught me about our modern society that we live in today, and it's something that one should be proud of. You know.
Right. Well, no, I'll tell you real quick. You know, since I kind of went on what I'm going to call it a journey, and started, you know, like to study the language, study the culture, going back to Italy a bunch of times. You know, found relatives in Italy. It's changed me as a person. Like, I can honestly tell you, I am not the same person I was 10 years ago for a lot of reasons. But this was part of it because I think you nailed it. You know, understanding your culture and where you came from, it really does create like, hey, I'm a part of something, you know, whereas you're just on your own island. You do feel like you're part of something. And I do think that helped me as a person. But I want to have a kind of a fun, quick, you know, we got a few minutes left, but I want to ask something. You said 5 cheeses. What are they? I'm dying to know now.
The five cheeses that I analyzed.
Certo.
So I analyzed, of course.
Voglio sapere.
Certo, adesso te lo dico. The Parmesan versus Parmigiano Reggiano. I analyzed Gorgonzola, so Gorgonzola real versus Italian sounding. Romano, which is the Italian sounding version of Pecorino Romano. Ricotta, which technically isn't a cheese, but I still analyzed it. And mozzarella. So I found that those 5 cheeses, those 5 Italian-sounding cheeses, represent, I believe it was about 92-ish% of the available quote-unquote Italian cheeses in the United States, which means that only 8% were real Italian.
Wow.
Which is mind-boggling. And I remember specifically going through all the databases and, oh my gosh, and just crunching these numbers. And when I got that, I was like, is that real? And I guess it is, because if we look at, most of the United States doesn't have access to these Italian products like we do on the East Coast. Like, if you think like the central states, where are you going to go get Parmigiano Reggiano or Gorgonzola, the real deal? Very difficult.
But so you're telling me that Velveeta is not a real cheese?
No.
But it comes in a can.
It comes in a can. Oh my gosh! And then the fact, it's oh my god! I gotta behave.
I'm not gonna lie, because I do like Velveeta on crackers. But you're right; it's not real cheese.
That's right. Yeah, I know. Listen, people can like whatever they like. Obviously,
that's so toxic, buddy. It is so toxic.
It is toxic. I'm for transparency. That's all. You know.
But you know, you did say one thing. You said mozzarella. Voglio domandarti qualcosa o chiederti qualcosa. Qual è la differenza tra buffalo mozzarella e mozzarella?
Mozzarella di bufala comes from a buffalo.
Literally.
Buffalo
Okay, so it literally does come from buffalo. Okay.
Yes, and in fact, if you try that type of mozzarella, it has more of the word I'm looking for, a very strong taste, a very distinct taste compared to that of a fior di latte, which we call colloquially mozzarella. which comes from a cow. So there's a big difference between the two. And yeah, I mean, I personally love them both, but I like all cheeses, so it's easy for me to like cheese.
Well, I love when every time I'm in, especially Rome, and I get the buffalo mozzarella e prosciutto crudo. So I love that. They put the raw prosciutto and the
Right.
mozzarella on the plate, and I mean that is just delicious.
Simple. So it's all about simple food, high quality ingredients, and like a good piece of bread, a glass of wine, and I'm good.
That's it.
I'm good. You don't have to cook for 12 hours.
That's right.
Good.
In fact, I was told that a good recipe shouldn't have more than 5 ingredients in it.
Bravo, bravissimo. I say like five, 6 ingredients, if you will, and you're 100% correct with that. If you see the ingredient list for a recipe, it's like add this, then this, then this, then this is like,
right.
And you're just making a simple pasta dish. Oof.
Well, that's right.
I think twice about that.
But and kind of ironic though, is we're kind of learning here in America over the last probably year or so what's been pumped into our food. And you think you're getting I'll just kind of jokingly say something. You're getting bread. And there's like 50 ingredients. You're like, this is bread. It's like flour, water, eggs, yeast, whatever. I mean, what do you put in bread? So,
yeah, I mean, there should be only like 4 ingredients. Really.
Right.
It's bread.
All right, Robert. I just want to thank you again, buddy. I appreciate you taking time out because I know you're busy because you're out there trying all these freaking cheeses. What the heck? So
I'll try them for you. Don't worry.
Grazie mille. Oh, and it's grazie for the nostri ascoltatori, not grazie. So, but I want to. I mean, we're going to do it right, buddy. We're going to do it right. But I do want to ask you, where can we follow you and learn more information? Because I know people are going to be interested now.
So I'm all over social media, Instagram, TikTok, Stop Italian Sounding. All you have to do is go to those platforms and look up Stop Italian Sounding. I also have a website, but most of my work's on the social media pages. My website is Stop Ita Sounding. That's stopitasounding.com. But again, I suggest you go instead to the social medias because you're going to get a bunch of videos. You're going to get a lot of good stuff.
Awesome.
So it's fun. I like it.
I appreciate it, man, and I enjoyed the conversation. I can't lie, buddy. I like to eat, and the better the food, the more I like to eat, and my belly will be a witness to this. But Robert, again, I want to thank you. I want to thank you again for taking time out. I always appreciate my guests, and I always want to thank my listeners. The fact that people tune in means something to me, so you are greatly appreciated. Robert, the fact that you took time out of your schedule to join me today and have a fun conversation means something to me. So thank you all very much. Robert, any final thoughts?
Well, I just want to thank you, of course, for having me on the show. This was a very fun conversation. I like the fact that we spoke about history as well, because it's not always that I get to talk about history when I'm on a podcast or a show, and I appreciate that because that helps form even food, for example. So thank you very much, and best of luck to everything that you're involved in too. So
awesome.
Complimenti. Thanks. And in bocca al lupo.
Crappy. Robert, wait a minute. Before we leave, I want to make this known to our listeners because I tell you what, I still hear people say grazie. Why don't you explain cosa significa bocca al lupo?
Allora, in bocca al lupo is kind of like, first of all, it literally means in the mouth of the wolf, but it's similar to the English expression go break a leg. We don't want them really to break a leg. So it's a way to wish them good luck. In bocca al lupo, in the mouth of the wolf, we then reply with crepi, which is literally coming from the verb crepare, like to die, and crepi is a wish that the wolf dies, I guess, so you could get out of that mouth of the wolf. I guess that's what it is. So,
sí, perfecto.
Yes.
Oh, that's awesome, Robert.
Bocca al lupo, crepi.
All right, awesome. And folks, see, you just learned something, so we appreciate you. Now you can go out to your friends when they're about to do something, say, bocca al lupo, and they're going to say, thanks. You're going to go, no, crepi. And by the way, don't say grazie to an Italian when they say bocca al lupo.
No,
so that's a whole other thing. Robert, thank you very much. Listeners, grazie mille per tutto. And for my listeners all over the world, thank you very much. I'm going to learn to say thank you in about 30 different languages. So we'll see you again next week. In the meantime, you have a blessed and wonderful and safe week. You take care, everyone.